This idea of being able to become an American is one of the most radical ideas in the history of the world. It is an idea we have, in many ways, failed to extend to all the people we were supposed to for all of our history. But it is a powerful idea worth defending, and we are trying to become something really fucking cool.
In the 1930s, Henry Luce went to Moscow and he interviewed Joseph Stalin. And Stalin said that he would wreck the United States. It would take him 10 years. And Luce, of course, was a staunch American, sort of a conservative Republican. He said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you're a tribal nation. You're a polyglot. You are not a melting pot, but you're just a series of tribes. And with the forces of the KGB and all of the disinformation techniques we have here in Russia, we're going to split your tribes and we're going to cause a second civil war and destroy your nation. And so what Stalin got wrong was the love that our grandparents had for the country. Even if they were being discriminated against, it was still way better than where they came from. And then, of course, the advent of the Second World War galvanized the whole country. But what he also got wrong, though, Anand, was they didn't have the social media mechanisms in place to do what they were saying because the media was controlled by some corporations that were mostly pro-American. Okay, now fast forward to Vladimir Putin. He's got those mechanisms. He can put that pipe of disinformation into the social media sewage system, and he can create havoc inside the country. Okay, so don't react to that yet because I'm going to another quote, and I want you to synthesize both. So while we have that going on, Kuan Yew, before he died, the founder of Singapore, in one of his last interviews, they said, well, so are you optimistic or pessimistic about America? In his 90s, Mr. Lee said, no, I'm very optimistic about America because America can draw from the whole world. You can come to America in 5 short years. You are American, Singaporean American, Italian American, Indian American, and a result of which they can have this reservoir of intellectual capital that's never ending. That is not true for Germany, Japan, China, et cetera. You don't have that level of assimilation. And so synthesize these things for me. Is Stalin right? Are we too tribal and our enemies can break us up? Is Lee right? Where if we get the immigration policies right, we can continually renew America, version 3.0 and 4.0 America. Who's right?
I think in certain ways, they're both telling an important truth, and what is not resolved is which of those truths is going to dominate the 21st century in America.
So, well, which one, in your opinion, is?
Let me take each one in turn, though, because I lived the Lee Kuan Yew truth personally in a way that I want to share with you, because I think it has really informed my understanding of America in a way that sometimes makes me think about this a little bit differently than a lot of my own allies on the political left, which is, I am, as you know, I'm critical of a whole bunch of things in this country, as are you, and critical of fundamental structures and systems in this country that do not treat certain people well. However, I'm also the son of immigrants who came to this country from India, chose this country, became American. And we had a very interesting experience when I was 7 years old, living in Shaker Heights, Ohio. My parents got kind of bored of their adrenaline-fueled immigrant adventure. First, it was hard. It was challenging. How do you figure out the video game of a new country? And then they got it. 2 cars, house in the suburbs, 2 kids. It kind of got easy, and they crashed. And they were like, let's do it again. Let's immigrate again, right? Very kind of unusual thing. So they choose to immigrate to France this time when I'm 7. Now, you got to remember, they're now 10 years. My dad's 10 years further into his career. They have more money at this point. They have more stability. They have more wherewithal. And from the first day we arrived in France, and I remember this as a 7-year-old, watching my parents experience France in this way, it was so clear that this will never belong to you. You will never be part of this. You will never become one of us. It wasn't outright discrimination. It wasn't like you can't be here. It wasn't being treated like crap in restaurants, anything like that. It was just like, there is no idea here, native to this country, of people becoming French. It's not a thing.
Why?
Right? Becoming German. is not a thing. Becoming Swedish is not a thing. Becoming Indian is not a thing. Becoming Chinese is not a thing. My friend Eric Liu wrote a great book called The Chinaman's Chance. He observed brilliantly. He says, my family has been in China for all of recorded human history, right? Like 5,000 years, however many thousands of years Eric Liu's family has been in China. For one generation out of those hundreds of generations, his family was not in China. I think his parents moved here, right? Or maybe his grandparents, right? So one or two generations out of hundreds, they broke the chain of their Chinese citizenship. And Eric made the observation that he could never become a Chinese citizen again, right? I think he was born as an American citizen. There's no way for Eric Liu, who's only been missing from China, his family, for one generation, no way he could ever become Chinese. No way his kids could ever become Chinese. And so my sense of America is that this idea of being able to become an American is one of the most radical ideas in the history of the world. It is an idea we have in many ways failed to extend to all the people we were supposed to for all of our history. But it is a powerful idea worth defending, and we are trying to become something. And I think it's easier if you think about it as trying to become a process, a journey. We are trying to become something really fucking cool, for lack of a more technical term.
I'm right? All about it, by the way. I love your I mean, we may not agree ideologically on everything, you and me, we may not, okay? But I love the message. So keep going. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
so I think that part is very real. And I wish more of my friends on the political left would say that part, because I think we need to make sure we are coming across to Americans as people who love the country and love the ideals of the country and understand why they're special and cool. And to make clear, as James Baldwin did, that we are criticizing precisely because we love the country. Precisely because...
exactly. I appreciate that. I totally appreciate that.
I think the second part of what you're saying, which is what Stalin attempted to do and Vladimir Putin has done, is to make a gamble that the same phenomenon I just described, a country made of all the world instead of, a nation of people who look like each other's cousins, that this is too hard. That's what Stalin was telling Henry Luce. That's what Vladimir Putin gambled. It's too hard. This is not a workable model, right? And so Kuan Yew is stating an aspirational, admiring notion, but it's aspirational. It's predictive. We're not quite there yet. We haven't tested it out. We're heading to be this kind of majority minority country, the superpower of color within your and my lifetimes. And it's not tested whether it's tenable, whether it can hold together, whether people's desire to keep the republic will overwhelm their desire kind of not to share what feels with people who feel alien to them. And so what Putin did, and I start the book with this for a reason, I start the book with these two women, this kind of Russian intelligence officer, Thelma and Louise kind of duo, who came to America in June of 2014, did a road trip around a whole bunch of states, picked up research, tried to kind of absorb the political system the way a reporter, or travel writer would, and then went back to Russia and informed this troll farm in St. Petersburg, the Internet Research Agency, which, exactly as you say, didn't just try to make us angrier, specifically inflamed these tribal divisions. And, as someone who has been, adjacent to the political world, like countries have a lot of ways of messing with each other, right? And the US and Russia have like a whole bunch of different arrows in the quiver, right? It's really significant. Like you can take out someone's power grid, you can sabotage some bank, you can do sanctions, you can, right? No lack of options of sabotage in this ongoing adversarial relationship. Think about this for a second. Vladimir Putin, imagine the meetings that were going on 2012, 2013, 2014. Vladimir Putin presumably orders that the big Russian effort to undercut its greatest adversary, the United States, is getting into our social media and altering and inflaming how we talk to each other. Like, think of the brilliance of that, right? Of all the things you could do. He said, they can fix the power grid in Houston, right? Like, what his calculation was that that's something we can't fix. If we go down the road of what I would call contempt and dismissal, right? Which is different from anger and division. I actually think anger and division are fine in politics. Like, politics is about really hard issues. Like, it's going to get real, right? Contempt and dismissal is different from anger and division. Contempt and dismissal is, there's no point bothering with the mooch. There's no point. Someone like him is never going to XYZ. There's no point. There's no point, right? I am angry that the mooch thinks this about taxes, leads me to further engagement, makes me want to vote and argue with you, right? Write an op-ed.
Well, also demonize me, though. Demonize me. Make me into a two-dimensional character.
But when you get to that contempt and dismissal place, of course someone would say that. Those people will always think that. And we're all doing this to each other right now. And I just think it was so interesting. Having participated in this culture myself, I don't know if you feel like you've also, and I think we've all in many ways participated in an increasingly inflammatory, particularly online culture that spills offline, of course. It's interesting to me. Let's just think for a second that we were playing into Vladimir Putin's wet dream of how we should relate to each other as Americans to undermine the goal of that kind of country made of the world that Lee Kuan Yew was talking about.